Hello, this is Dr. Winkler again. I'm very embarrassed because I was lecturing about Napoleon last time and I didn't really get through him. It'd be quite logical for the progression of the course if I would finish with him before I went on to other topics. However, I probably should have just not cut it off at that time frame and kept lecturing. I do want you to know this is the first mistake I've ever made in my life. However, I'm very embarrassed and I would like to proceed now for a few minutes to finish the lecture on Napoleon. And then, of course, next time I'll be recording other issues. The last thing I was talking about before I thought I'd run out of time was the Continental System. Remember what that is? It is a boycott of goods. It is the attempt by Napoleon to get at Britain economically. If you no longer trade with Britain, anybody on the continent, literally as far east as you can go to Russia, far west you can go to Spain. If nobody trades with Britain, then British economy, of course, will be hurt. When the British economy is hurt, then they might be brought to terms. One of the reasons why this backfired was that France and the continent, people on the continent of Europe, needed the goods and services actually more than the British needed to sell them. Yes, this hurts Britain economically, but it also hurts the continent economically. As I mentioned last time, one of the issues is this. Napoleon has to have cloth for his men. He has to have cloth for the tents. He has to have cloth for the clothing that they wear. Where is he going to get it? Well, he can buy it from the British. When he doesn't have that opportunity, his men do without. So this actually hurts him, hurts his combat readiness, and it hurts Europe economically. Some of the people that did give Napoleon their support were attempting to get money from him, like contracts for military materials. Because this is no longer possible, a lot of these people lose money. Therefore, a lot of people are pretty upset with their support for Napoleon. Remember, one of the ways Napoleon gets money is by attacking other countries. You come in, you pillage, you plunder. You take what's valuable there and you take it back to France, which you can now use to support your war machine. In 1808, France invades Spain. Now, Spain, remember I mentioned it in a couple of the contexts, Spain had been in economic decline for centuries, going back by this time from a couple hundred years. It's no longer a first-rate power in Europe. Quite frankly, it's not much of even a second-rate power. So it becomes difficult for them to resist invasion of hundreds of thousands of Frenchmen. There is, at one point, Napoleon actually comes down himself, bringing in large armies to try to control Spain. It never works. Spain actually becomes a place where his armies just go and disappear. When men were recruited or drafted in places as far away as Germany, and they realized they're going to be sent to Spain, the desertion rates are higher. At one point, men who were drafted in Westphalia, that's an area of Germany, and they were deployed in Spain, something like only a quarter of them ever lived to come back because the terrain is tough and the war is very tough. Now, there's a British army down there operating. If it hadn't been for them, the Spanish resistance probably would not have been terribly effective. But with the fact that you have a British army operating down there under the Duke of Wellington, who's later going to fight Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, this combination is something that Napoleon and his marshals, his generals, never figure out how to beat. Thus, there is enmity, shall we say hatred, between France and Spain going back very long. In fact, remember I mentioned where I was talking about St. Ignatius Loyola, that he's fighting on the border with He's a Spaniard fighting on the border with France. The war's been going on for a long, lengthy time down there. The Spanish don't like the French. I've been told they still don't like the French. One of the reasons, well, we'll be discussing that right away. The Spanish use what we call guerrilla warfare. Let's look at the origin of the terms. I don't speak Spanish. My Spanish is horrible. In fact, I don't know a taco from a burrito. But I've been told the Spanish word for war is guerra. A small war is guerrilla. So guerrilla warfare is not a bunch of apes throwing bananas at people. Guerrilla warfare, guerrilla, is in fact irregular warfare. By regular warfare, we say, if you're regular warfare, you got a guy in a uniform. Walks out, and he's got his musket, mucks out, and they take shots at each other. That's formal warfare. Irregular warfare is actually when you have people in society. This can be the guy who works in the village. In fact, if he's a barber, maybe he shaved you this afternoon, and tonight he sneaks out and tries to slit your throat. These are farmers. These are people who live in towns who are willing to risk death and maiming simply by fighting against the French. This is a problem that France never can resolve. Spain becomes literally a bleeding sinkhole of a disaster for them. Let's look at an eyewitness, a man who's alive and working in Spain at this time frame. His name is Francisco de Goya. Goya is considered to be one of the great national treasures of Spain because he's a very talented artist. But he's an artist with a bite. He's a contemporaneous. He's also an eyewitness. He knows what's going on. Let's take a look at how he depicts what's happening in Spain. He's depicting an uprising in Madrid. French troops are there. People run out of their shops. They grab what weapons are handy. Sometimes clubs, sometimes knives. If they're more sophisticated, they tend to have guns. But a lot of these people don't. So he makes this depiction, calls it the 2nd of May. Can I get a bigger version of that? That's another scene. Any event, what we're looking at here, they're all about the same size. If you look closely enough, what we're seeing is this. The Spanish, they're down here. These are the people essentially out in the street, are running out, grabbing Frenchmen, doing hand-to-hand combat with them. You can't see this because it's not quite as close as I would like to have it. Here we go. You see a man with a knife and another man with a knife. I'm not sure what the weapon is this man has down here. Let's get a little bit bigger yet. I'm not sure what he's got. He's got some kind of implement where he can stab. But can you see what's happening here? In this case, we have the Spanish that are revolting, grabbing French troops. This man's being drugged from his horse, and obviously, with a couple men stabbing him, he's being killed. The Frenchmen, of course, up on their horses. This man has his sword, and he's slashing, trying to defend himself. Can we say this is a scene of an action? Well, that's not all Goya wants to say about this incident. There is a retaliation. While he calls the first painting the 2nd of May, 1808, the French retaliate, not too good, on the 3rd of May, the exact same day. Well, they round up people. Remember, Napoleon had already done this in Italy. You simply, if you have resistance, you grab all the people that are nearby. They might not have anything to do with the resistance, but you grab these people, you out and you execute them. This is a depiction of a scene of execution. All right, this works. It's a larger painting here. I've never seen these. I understand that they reside now in some museums in Madrid. Unfortunately, I've never been to Spain. I would love to go sometime. However, let's look at this depiction. The French don't look like they're really human beings, do they? They're really faceless, like automatrons. They're just out there, they're killing. And notice the blood, very heavy. If we could look closer, I believe there's a bullet hole in this man's forehead where he's been shot. Look at this guy. He's a monk. Monks can't shed blood. It's against their vows. And so you're killing this man in retaliation as well. These men are not exactly going willingly to the execution. They're crying, obviously, I would bawl too if somebody's going to kill me. Now, he's trying to depict a picture. Goya is trying to tell us something, but he's also making a commentary. Notice this figure right here. Stands up very nicely. Notice that he's wearing white. These other people are wearing different colors. If I could get this a little larger, and I cannot, if I could get this a little larger, I have seen larger representations of this. See the man's hands and see the position of his hands. As we see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ depicted in art, we have him up on a cross with his hands in a very similar condition, a very similar posture as we see this man right here. If we could look closely, and I cannot, you actually can see there's elements of holes in his hands. Can we say that Goya is making a very powerful statement here? This man looks and represents perhaps the innocence of Jesus Christ. But the French not only would kill a monk, they would kill Christ himself. I had these paintings up here, and I don't have them anymore. Okay, I will do it the old-fashioned way and start at the beginning. Let's go with Goya. And disasters of war. This is gory. I'm not forcing you to look. If you don't want to look, don't look. But he's trying to represent the kinds of things that the French were doing. Images, these are etchings. They're national treasures in Spain, of course, where Goya is trying to depict the kinds of things that were going on, the kinds of things that you could see. When there's an uprising here, we have a Frenchman here accosting a woman with a sword. Sometimes when the Spaniards are fighting, that's not a very large representation. Let's try that one. They're using implements you can get on the farm, such as an axe. In retaliation, there's a Frenchman here hanging Spaniards from trees. Times he depicts women who are trying to fight against the French. In this case, she's servicing a cannon. What this woman happens to be doing is she's lighting the fuse. That's a pretty big gun. That's very large for a field piece. But if that hits anybody, that can do some severe damage. Perhaps the most brutal of them all, of course, you have men assaulting women. Perhaps the most brutal of them all is when Goya depicts the dismemberment of Spaniards and literally cutting their bodies to shreds. Please do not look unless you really want to see this. Well, go to Wikipedia. This is really quite horrific. Well, I leave it up to you to look at that because I lost the one I was trying to show you. Now, is it possible that Goya lost his mind? Yes, he did. He went insane. I am not terribly surprised that this happened when these kinds of things are going on in his country. Spain, the issue in Spain for France is never resolved. And it costs Napoleon a great deal of manpower, a great deal of wealth, and a great deal of time to try to fight a war he cannot win. Try to get a map on this one. Napoleon invaded Russia. He wants to go to Moscow. It's interesting because Moscow nowadays is the capital of Russia. Back then it's St. Petersburg. He doesn't march on St. Petersburg. It's farther north. But in the center of this nation, Moscow is a big city. It's a big commercial area. And Napoleon thinks if he can take that city, he's got Russia. Well, there are problems with this. It's a long ways away. The roads aren't good. It can be very challenging at best. Why would Napoleon invade Russia? Well, he hasn't resolved the issue in Spain, but he's pretty well controlling Germany. He's pushed Austria back. He created a duchy of Warsaw, so that allows the Poles to exist for a little while. He's dominated a lot of Italy. See, what can he get from Russia? He can get revenge for one issue. Remember, he's married to Josephine. Josephine had children before they got married. Josephine did not have children. If Napoleon loved anybody, he loved Josephine. But he's cruel in a lot of respects. He knows he can have children because he has illegitimate children. So all he has to do is divorce Josephine, which is hard for him to do. He actually did care for her, I think, and marry somebody else. So who can he marry? He wants to marry a princess somewhere in Europe. So at least on her side of the family, if they have children, when they have children, that you have somebody there to carry on. In other words, part of a royal line. He approaches the Russians to have them marry one of the princesses over there. He's spurned. He eventually marries an Austrian princess, with whom he has one son, small child. We don't hear too much about that child because the child grew up in Austria, and the child was involved in drilling troops. As a young man, early 20s, he got pneumonia and died. He's easy to forget. But at least at this point, Napoleon does have what he considers to be a male heir. But he still is chafing because Russia spurned him. Another major factor in this is there's a lot of wealth in Russia. It's a big agricultural nation. And obviously there is a very wealthy nobility. You can go and get more glory. He wants more glory. He can get more plunder, help pay for his army, help pay for everything he's doing. Is this a practical place? Is this a good place to invade? In reality, it's a bad place to invade. Let's get us a map here. He leads in the Duchy of Warsaw, which is similar to Poland, and over here in East Prussia. The distance he is traveling is a long ways. Maybe that map is a little complicated. I find this one quite interesting because it's trying to give you an idea as to the nature of the loss of men. He starts out with an absolutely huge army, 600,000 men. Oh, by the way, when he tells his marshals, his important military men, that he's going to invade Russia, they think he's lost his mind. One of the famous quotes from his marshals is this: "The emperor is mad. He's completely mad. This cannot work." Napoleon, delusions of grandeur, believes that it can. He takes 600,000 men. Only about a third of that army, about 200,000 of which are Frenchmen. The other ones are levies, people that are drafted, or volunteers from other areas. Large Swiss contingents, large German contingents, for example, are with him. As he marches into Russia, the Russian army withdraws. They pull back. They pull back. Russia loses men. They get sick. The roads are bad. Their feet are sore. And the Russians burn the countryside before them. So there's no place for Napoleon to get the plunder he wants. Also, he can't ravage the area for food. So there's an issue. More and more people are hungry. His army is becoming weaker and weaker. Finally, just before the French army got to Moscow, the Russians decide they're going to fight. At the Battle of Borodino, a couple 100,000 men on either side, Napoleon is victorious. So he comes marching into Moscow. Now, he believes that, shall we say, there's some kind of rules of war. That when your enemy has defeated you and you take a major city, the enemy should come forward and formally surrender the city. And in the surrender terms, they should be willing to feed your army. Napoleon comes marching in. There's nobody come to surrender. Where are the people coming to surrender? They're not here. He waits for weeks. Nobody shows up. In the meantime, he's using his food resources. Something else I should mention, there are, of course, there's pyromaniacs living in Russia. There's people that like to set fires. Men are released from the prisons with the stipulation, we'll let you out of the prison, but you have to burn. The pyromaniacs are going, a dream come true, right? They release men from the prisons. They set fires all over the place. They literally burn the city. Not all the wealthy people got out in time to take all their booty with them. So the French are plundering the city when it's not on fire. Well, Napoleon has a terrible choice. After he's there for a few weeks, he realizes that no Russians are going to come forward and nobody's going to feed his army. He'll starve to death if they stay in that city. The only chance he's got is to get his army out. About all he knows is this. If you retreat, he can't go back the way he came because it's been destroyed. So he retreats by another route, hoping he can plunder. Well, the Russians are still out there burning. The serious attacks, the Cossacks come out. They are cavalry. They slice at Napoleon's people at every possibility. The Russians set up roadblocks trying to stop Napoleon's army from retreating. The French are able to fight through and bust through and keep on going, but their numbers go down and down and down. They're starving to death. One of the studies I've read said that one of the reasons why so many men in Napoleon's army died is they were suffering from a lack of salt. So wounds would fester more easily. There is a recent book out which is arguing that one of the biggest killers of Napoleon's men was actually typhus. I'm very embarrassed to say I haven't read the book yet, but I'm going to get it and read it because I would like to find out a little bit more about the destruction of Napoleon's army. It's a near thing. Almost the entire army is absolutely annihilated. He marches with 60,000. Some books say he marched out with 50. He marched in with 600,000. Some books say he marched out with 50,000, 40,000, some even less than that. No matter which number we accept, he's lost more than 500,000 men. But I have right here, it costs more than 1 million lives because hundreds of thousands of Russians die. Hundreds of thousands of Russian troops die. And hundreds of thousands of Russian peasants die as well in this terrible conflagration. 1 million lives. The cost is enormous. Well, Napoleon, of course, isn't going to stay. Remember when he left his army to dwindle and virtually disappear and suffer in Egypt, he's not going to sit around and watch his army dwindle. So when he gets close to the borders where he began, he runs away and leaves his army to its fate. And many of them do survive, or say a very small handful do survive. While Napoleon's running back to France to maintain his position. By this time frame, he's drafting no longer men. He's already drafted all the 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds. He starts drafting 15-year-old boys. Can we say you get a lot of numbers that way, but boys that are that age are physically and psychologically immature. They don't make as good troops. A huge battle. We call this the Battle of Leipzig. It is also remembered as the Battle of Nations. 200,000-300,000 men involved on either side. Huge contingents of people that come from various areas, Russia included, various areas of Germany, getting this large coalition army to fight Napoleon and his levies, the men he has drafted from all over. And Napoleon is defeated. Huge battle, huge loss of life. Now Napoleon just simply falls back into France. He doesn't really have much of an army anymore. He thinks about maybe I can escape to America. Well, he gets captured. And well, now the victorious people, they've grabbed this guy, they've destroyed his army. They have forces that are in and around France. What shall we do with Napoleon? Well, he's a usurper according to them. And he can be killed. But that's a challenging situation. If you kill an enemy leader, what happens if next time you're the country that loses, and you're the leader of the country that loses? Do you want to be killed as well? So they want to kill him. Just get him out of town. So what he does, they take him and place him on Elba. Elba is an island off the coast of Italy. It is small. Essentially, they allow Napoleon to rule there. He's even given like 1,000 troops, 1,000 men, so he can parade them around and march around a little bit. There's really nothing for him to do. But he's not being incarcerated to the point where it's hurting him. He just has to sit on this island, and he can't rule anything. His mother is still alive. She shows up and says, Napoleon, go back to France and fulfill your destiny. Well, he gets on a rowboat, goes over to France. The King of France now, Louis XVIII, has a problem. France had been controlled by Napoleon's armies for so long. That's all he's got. So he talks to the leaders had fought actually for Napoleon, saying, will you be loyal to me? And they take oaths. Yes, Marshal Ney, for example, says, yes, I will be loyal to you. So he says, okay, I will have to use you people, at least for the time being, to defend France. Then Napoleon shows up in 1815. Comes in and he goes, the army that's sent to arrest him joins him. So here we go again, one last round. He's loose in France for like 100 days. He sends letters to everybody saying, oh, well, I'm back again. All's forgiven. Let's just have peace. Nobody believes him. You can never believe this man. So armies are sent. Some of the armies that are nearby are the British Army under the Duke of Wellington and the Prussians, which is a part of Germany, under Blücher. So, Marshal Blücher. So anyway, they meet at Waterloo. It's an area in modern Belgium. And there's so many books written on Waterloo. You know, they literally stack from here out the door. It's huge numbers. It's very important because it's the last time we actually see Napoleon fighting. It is the last gasp of the Napoleonic era. It's the last gasp of his 22 years of warfare, which starts in 1792. Make that 23 years. Without going into detail on the battle, Napoleon's beaten. And now all he can do is run back to Paris, and he's captured again. Now what are you going to do with him? He's not going to be sent to Elba or anything like that with a rowboat. He's taken to St. Helena under guard for the remainder of his life. St. Helena is an island in the Atlantic. Well, there's a picture of the island. I'd actually like to show you where it is in the Atlantic. Let's go to images, see if I got a map here. How about a map? Can you say by looking at this is not the Garden of Eden? Quite frankly, St. Helena is out in the middle of nowhere. It's not even north of the equator. It's south of the equator. It's a very barren place. It's a very unpleasant place to be. And where they have Napoleon living, it's got rats. Time and time again, Napoleon had promised things to friends. When he goes into exile, he has no friends. I did mention earlier, there's a couple of people that sail down with him who are willing to talk to him and write down his dictation. So we have a lot of information coming from Napoleon himself about his experiences. And he's down there for, what, 5, 6 years and dies. He has gastrointestinal problems, complains about this all the time. And when he dies, it's like there's something in his gut. Well, some historians have wondered, this sounds a little bit like poisoning. There's a theory. One of the things that people tended to do as a memento in the 19th century, this is the 1800s, when someone would die, you take a lock or a clip of people's hair. And when you did that kind of thing, you kept that as a memento. So when Napoleon dies, people clip his hair. Some of these follicles of hair are running around today. A number of years ago, researchers got some of them and tested them for arsenic. In some cases, the amount of arsenic in Napoleon's hair is like 600 times what we normally expect. Some people say, well, you cut arsenic various ways. Yeah, I guess, but you could also kill him with this. He's buried down there after he dies. When his body is taken back to France a few decades later, it rests now in the great, mausoleum in downtown Paris. Napoleon's tomb. I've been there. It's a very nice place. But anyway, his body was examined before it was brought back to Paris. The people who examined it said it doesn't look like his body has deteriorated. Now, he wasn't embalmed. Well, arsenic will do that. Was he poisoned? I don't think the case is a lock, but I want to say that the evidence seems to go in that direction. Well, what do we make of this man? So he has psychological problems. Let's look at a few of these. Does he fit the definition of a psychopath? Constantly lies, yes. Can lie to the press, lie to people. He has no feeling. No loving relationships. Apparently he didn't even have a close relationship with members of his family. Once again, I already mentioned, if he loved anybody, it was Josephine. But we can say loving relationships are rare, hardly existing at all. Is he impulsive and irrational? Yes. We're going to invade Russia. That's irrational, right? That is irrational. Everybody who's around him says, as emperor, you should know better. This won't work. So yeah, I'll do it. Just go ahead and go out and do it because I want to. It'll work. That's impulsive and irrational. No sense of guilt. Going back to his military prowess. Thousands of men die. Tens of thousands of men die. If you add up over the various campaigns, millions of people die. He has no sense of guilt. No remorse. Another issue is failure to learn from your mistakes. For example, he went into Spain. It didn't work. It didn't work. Made a mistake. Let's go into Russia. It'll work there. Well, maybe it won't work there either. You see, he actually expands himself to the point where he destroys himself. Napoleon is one of the most important people in modern history. I'm going to give you his due. He did increase the education system in France. When he invades various countries, he does have a tendency to go in and free the serfs, kind of kick out the nobles. They do come back later, but it's hard to get the genie back in the bottle, so society doesn't go back to actually what it was before. He emancipates Jews, allows Jews to leave the cities, to leave the ghettos, to go out in society. I would call this a positive. But let's see what the cost was. Whatever he accomplished, I think the cost was enormous. Millions of lives is not something you easily dismiss. I don't think there's anything he accomplished that could have been accomplished other ways. If you want to free the serfs, and the serfs are going to free themselves anyway, in various places, and you want to spread the ideas of the French Revolution, but you can write pamphlets. I mean, you can send information. You don't have to send armies. The progress that was made, the social progress that was made during his time frame, would that have been made later? I think so. Would it have been made as rapidly? I don't think that. It probably would have taken decades, maybe 2 generations. But at least the human cost would have been less. For me personally, Napoleon is a man it's very hard for me to like. Well, I think I've caught up. I hope I didn't run off the mouth too much right here. And hopefully I will get caught up next time, but we'll start over. In the meantime, please accept my apology. I will not lecture you more than the time that we have allowed, but I will go on and record another lecture later. In the meantime, enjoy.